Over the last few weeks, US President Donald Trump held a meeting to discuss the topic of violence in video games, and particularly how it affects the young people of today. In this video, we're going to discuss why violence in video games, as well as movies and TV shows, is not to blame for atrocities and crimes committed by young people. This meeting was held in response to the recent school shooting in the US, and the question being asked is, are tragic events like this being caused in part by students who play violent video games, and then become inspired to replicate this in reality, or who have become desensitized to violence due to how much of it they see in video games and other forms of entertainment? The first point I'll make in response to this is that it's concerning this was one of the US government's first ports of call in response to the recent shooting. I'm fine with them taking an unbiased look into this topic, and it seems like that's what this is. But surely there are many other avenues that need to be explored as potential reasons behind these constant shootings in the US before you look at entertainment mediums. That leads me to another point, which is the constant and large number of shootings that seem almost exclusive to the US. As I mentioned before, the question being asked is if these violent video games play a part in causing these horrifying acts. But these video games are being played by millions of people all over the world, and these frequent mass shootings are almost limited to the US. Here in Australia, there was a mass shooting back in 1996, and the government responded by implementing strong new gun laws and restrictions that made it a very difficult process to purchase a weapon of this sort. Since then, mass shootings have been almost entirely eliminated in the country. This is just one of many examples where stricter gun laws have had a large impact on reducing the number of mass shootings in countries around the world. These countries also happen to play these violent video games, yet they've managed to almost eliminate mass shootings by making the changes that America still refuses to by implementing these strict gun laws. I often say that growing up in Australia, the only time I've seen a real gun in person has been strapped to the hip of a police officer. So it's hard for me to even imagine that a large number of Americans grow up with guns in their own homes or sitting on the shelf at their local retail store. I think it's also unfair to try and put the blame on video games, when if you were to tune into your local news broadcast, the stories that make the headlines are death, destruction and tragedy. It's almost a wonder that no one decides to question the effect that the news has on young minds. We've also seen cases in the past where a young person commits a crime and then they or their parent say they were inspired by a video game. This is nothing but a cop-out and masks the real problem. Firstly, it turns the blame off the person who actually committed the crime, and turns the blame onto the companies that produce these violent video games. But perhaps more concerning is the fact that it masks the real problem. Millions of people play these games and don't commit these crimes. So instead of turning our attention towards the games, maybe we should look at the person behind the crime and why they did it. Perhaps they've had a bad upbringing, or perhaps they're mentally unstable. The danger is, if we're looking to call out video games and other forms of entertainment media as bad influences, then we might miss the real problem and the person who is in need of help. So let us know in the comments below your thoughts on violence in video games, and whether its effect on young people is the cause of these horrifying tragedies. Remember to keep it civil, and respect the opinions of others while having a mature and measured conversation. Also be sure to like, subscribe, and check us out on our other social media platforms. You can find those links in the description box.